Assalamu alaikum dear students, how are you all? Hope you all are doing well. This is your teacher Rosina of subject Social Studies for class 5. I welcome you to another lecture of Social Studies. So let's begin with the great name of Allah, who is the most merciful and beneficial. Before we start continuing our chapter, there was some of the confusion to a few of the students in attempting the answers of the previous unit. So I have discussed all the answers in my all lectures very clearly, and I have told you the answers verbally. I have told you the answers orally. So you have to take help from the lecture, and I have also tried to mark you the answers. I have told you that where you could find the answers of the questions. So you have to take help from the lectures, and you have to write the answers on your own. So just try to take help from the lecture, because I have explained to you the answers of all the questions, and some of the questions I have marked the answers in the book as well. So you have to write the answers on your own, and you have to write the answers in your neat notebooks. Okay, so moving towards the lecture, in the previous lecture we have discussed about the different maps and the scales. Now we will be talking about the third chapter, that is reading maps and globes. So how do we read the map and how do we read the globe? So the first we have the lines of latitude and longitude. Now what are the lines of latitude and what are the lines of longitude? So on the earth, when you are reading the globe, or when you are reading the map, so there you will find the lines drawn with the angles given on it, right? Like for example 0 degrees, 30, minus 30, 60, minus 60, 90, minus 90. So these are the lines, and you can see these lines as well. So you will see that on the globe or on the map, when you read it, you will find these lines on them. These are not the lines made by nature. These are not present on the earth in real, but they are the imaginary lines, and these lines are made to make the reading of the globe and the reading of the map easy for the people, right? So if we have these lines, and we will know that when these lines, in simple words, these lines divide the earth in the certain regions, right, in the certain areas. So we will know that on the 0 degree centigrade, which countries come, on the 30 degree centigrade, which countries come, on minus 30, which countries exist on the map or on the globe. So these lines are not in real, rather they are imaginary lines drawn by the people themselves who make the globe or who make the maps, and they are very helpful in reading the maps. Okay, so now we will be reading about, okay, there are the two types of lines. One are the latitudes and one are the longitudes, and they are the imaginary lines that are formed, an imaginary grid. Grid means like this, right? Like the longitude and then the latitudes, vertical and horizontal lines making a small squares shapes between the on the map. So this is known as the grid. So it makes a sort of a grid or sort of a net on the map to make the study of the earth, to make the study of the map and the globe easy. And the latitudes and longitudes help to locate places on the map, and if you lay a grid over the map, the vertical and horizontal lines are the lines of latitude and longitude respectively. Okay, so now what are the latitudes? Latitudes are imaginary horizontal lines running in an east-west direction, left to right. So the lines that run from east to west, they are from left to right, they are known as the latitudes lines, right? So these are the imaginary horizontal lines known as the latitudes. and they are the imaginary, so we cannot see them. Latitude lines are also called parallels. Now these lines are also called the parallel lines because they are parallel to each other and they have the same distance from each other, right? So the distance from the central line to the other parallel latitude, the distance between all these lines is same, so that's why they are called as the parallel lines as well. Latitudes are measured in degrees using the symbol degree. Okay, so we measure these lines by the degrees using the symbol of the degree. Latitude degrees are numbered from 0 to 90 degree and 0 to 90 degree south. Okay, so we have seen you can see in this picture as well that we have the latitude line running from east to west or left to right. It is 0 degrees, right? So this is the central line of the earth, central imaginary line of the earth, and it is from the 0 degrees to 90 degree north and from 0 degrees to 90 degree south. So these lines are divided from 0 to 90 and from 0 to 90 north and 0 to 90 south. 0 degrees is the equator, which is an imaginary line of latitude dividing the earth into two halves. Now this line, that is the equator, it is an imaginary line and it is in the center of the earth. It is the central line of the earth on 0 degrees and it divides the earth into two halves. This is the one half and this is the other half. And the upper half, it is the upper half of the earth, that is from the equator to the north pole, and the other half of the earth, that is from the equator, the central line, to the south pole. And the upper half, it is called as the northern hemisphere because it is from the equator to the north. So from 0 degrees to 90 degrees to the north pole, it is the one half and it is known as the northern hemisphere. The other half, that is from the 0 degrees to 90 degrees south pole, that is the second half and that is called as the southern hemisphere. Okay, 90 degrees south is the south pole. Okay, now the 90 degree north is the north pole, we have the north pole here, and the 90 degree south is the south pole, we have the south pole or the southern regions here. Okay, there are a total of 180 imaginary lines of latitude, and the lines of latitude increase as they move away from 0 degrees to 90 degrees south and north pole, and the lines of latitude measure how far north or south an object is on earth from the equator. Okay, now this is the line, the central line, right? From it moves upward toward the 90 degrees, and from it moves downwards towards the 90 degrees, to the 90 degrees north and to the 90 degrees south. And there are about 180 imaginary lines, imaginary latitude lines on the earth. So the people who have made the globe or the map, they have created 180 imaginary lines of latitudes. Okay, there are 5 special lines of latitudes, so we will be discussing about those. So they are the equator, tropics of Cancer, tropics of Capricorn, Antarctic Circle and Arctic Circle. So equator is, we have discussed the imaginary central line that is on the 0 degree centigrade, and it divides the earth into two halves, the north and the south. The north is called as the northern hemisphere and the south is known as the southern hemisphere, and this equator line is on the 0 degrees, it is in the center of the earth. Then we have the tropics of Cancer and the tropics of Capricorn. The line that is about 23.5 degree north, right? 23.5 degree on the north, that is the line of tropics of Cancer, and 23 degree and a 23.5 degree the line that is in the southern region, that is known as the tropics of Capricorn. So the tropic of Cancer and tropic of Capricorn, they have the equal distance from the equator. So equator is on the 0 degrees, so tropic of Cancer and tropic of Capricorn are on the 23 degrees north and 23.5 degree north and 23.5 degree south. the reason that they are divided in the northern hemisphere and the southern hemisphere from the equator is that the temperature of this area remains the same. In the northern and in the southern, they have the same climate. So places within this region have high rainfall, so there is a high rate of rainfall in this region, and they have the high temperatures throughout the year. So they have the high temperatures throughout the year, and Bangladesh, Malaysia and Brazil are some of the countries that they come under this region. And the places that are further from these tropics, they experience the dramatic seasonal changes throughout the year, right? So they have almost the same temperature, same climate, almost the same climate throughout the year. So there is a high rainfall, and the temperature here are and they have the high temperatures throughout the year. But the places that are away from these tropics, they experience a very drastic, very dramatic seasonal changes. Okay, then we have the Arctic Circle, that is 66 and a half degrees south, and Arctic Circle 66 and a half degree north. So this is the Arctic Circle, that is in the northern hemisphere near the north, and this is the Antarctic Circle, that is in the southern hemisphere near the south, and they are on the 66 and a half degree north and 66 and a half degree south. And these are the coldest regions, right? These are the coldest regions, and they are mostly ice. They have mostly ice and ice glaciers. So we see that there is the equator in the center, then we have the tropics of Cancer and tropic of Capricorn. So these regions have the same temperature throughout the year, almost the same temperature throughout the year. Then we have the two other lines, Arctic of Circle in north and Antarctic Circle in the south, and they have the lowest temperature, while other regions that are between these lines in the areas here and the areas here, they have the dramatic seasonal change. They have the seasons there change, like they have the summers, they have the winters, and they have the different types of weathers. Okay, then we have the longitudes. We have discussed about the latitudes. Now we will discuss about the longitudes. Latitudes were the horizontal lines. Latitudes were the horizontal lines from east to west. Now we have the longitudes. Longitudes are the vertical lines. They are from the north to south, right? So the vertical lines moving from top to bottom, they are known as the vertical lines. And these lines are also imaginary, like the latitudes. And the latitude lines were called as the parallels, but the longitude lines are called as the meridians, right? And they measure how far east or west an object is, and these lines, they measure that how far some area is away from the east and how far it is away from the west. So if some region that comes in 150 degrees, or that comes in the 30 degrees, right? So you can see that this is the longitude line. So if it's something in the 30, so we said that this area is 30 degrees towards the east, right? So it tells us about the area, how far that area is from the east and how far that is from the west. In the latitude lines, the 0 degree line was the equator line that divided the earth into two hemispheres, the northern and the southern hemisphere. Now these lines also have a central line, that is the 0 degrees, and that passes through the Greenwich meridian, that is known as the Greenwich meridian or prime meridian, and that is, prime means the first or most important. So this line is the most important because it divides the earth into two halves. One is the west half and the other is the eastern east half, and the west half is called as the western hemisphere and the east half is called as the eastern hemisphere. So the equator, it divided the earth into northern and southern hemisphere, and the Greenwich meridian, it divides the earth into the western and eastern hemisphere, right? and this line, it passes through the Greenwich city of Greenwich, that is in England. So the Greenwich city is the half of the earth, and it divides earth into the eastern hemisphere and the western hemisphere. Another special longitude line is the international date line, that is 180 east of prime meridian. Okay, now we have another line that is the most important line, and that falls on the 180 degree of the earth, right? And that is known as the IDL, or international date line. Now that is a very most important line, because it tells us, or it divides the earth according to the time, right? So it tells us that how the earth will be divided in the different time zones. So that is known as the international date line. So all the countries of the earth, they adjust their time, they adjust their clocks, keeping in view the time on the international date line. So they divide the earth into different time zones, they divide the countries into different time zones according to the time of the international date line. And Pakistan is located within the latitude and longitude of 30 degree north and 70 degree east. The hemisphere, there are the four hemisphere. They are the northern, southern, western and eastern hemisphere. The equator, it divides the earth into northern and southern hemisphere. And the prime meridian, it is a meridian. Prime meridian divides the earth into western and eastern hemisphere. Then we have the time zones. Okay, in early time there was no need to set the time, keeping in mind the time of the other countries as well. Every local place, every local city, every local country, each and every city, they set the time according to their own choice. So there was no comparison of the time of the different countries, right? Nowadays we say that for example, we say that India is 8 or 4 or 5 hours it is behind us, right? And some of the countries that are the time, they have different time zones as compared to the time of the Pakistan, right? But there was a time, that was 100 years ago, there was no need to set the time comparing the time with the other countries. There was no need to set the time according to the time of the other countries, right? But then what happened was that then there was the time when the communication and the transport occurred, right? So people moved from one place to another place for the trading, right? So tijarat ke liye, so for the trading, they moved from one place to another place, and the trains were made at that time. So there was a specific time for the train to pass through a certain city. Like nowadays the trains, they have a certain time, they have the timetable that the certain train will pass through this city at this time, right? So then at that time there was a need to set the time according to the other countries as well, राइट एक टाइम था जब वक्त की ज़रूरत नहीं थी कि टाइम हर एक कंट्री, हर एक सिटी जो है वो अपने अकॉर्डिंगली टाइम सेट करता था. लेकिन जब कम्युनिकेशन स्टार्ट हुई, जब लोगों को एक जगह से दूसरी जगह जाना पड़ा, जब ट्रेन्स आ गई थी, तो उन ट्रेन्स का एक टाइम टेबल होता था कि एक स्पेसिफिक सर्टन सिटी से, फ़लाँ सिटी से ये ट्रेन जो है वो इस टाइम गुजरेगी. तो उस वजह से फिर क्या हुआ कि टाइम को बाकी कंट्रीज़ के अकॉर्डिंग, बाकी सिटीज़ के अकॉर्डिंग या बाकी रीजन्स के अकॉर्डिंग सेट करना ज़रूरी हो गया था, राइट? ओके, सो at that time the idea of time zone was adopted. The earth was divided into 24 separate time zones. So you see, if in New York it is 5 to 7, so in London it would be 5 to 12, in Istanbul it would be 5 to 2, in Dubai it would be 5 to 4, and in Lahore it would be 1 o'clock, right? So this is the time according to the different time zones. So the earth was divided into 24 separate time zones. Okay, All people living in one time zone set their clock to the same local time. Okay, now the people living in one time zone, they all set their clocks according to that local time. For example, if in Lahore it is 1 o'clock, in Peshawar it would be 1 o'clock, in Karachi it would be 1 o'clock, in Balochistan it would be 1 o'clock, right? So in all over the country it would be 1 o'clock, it would be the same time. But there are some countries, they do not follow the one time zone, right? For example, in the USA, Canada and Australia, they divide into 3 or more time zones. For example, if in USA, in one state there is 1 o'clock, so maybe in the other state it is 2 o'clock, right? So the time zone, if the Pakistan is like small country, so there is no big difference in the time zones. So the time in one city, so the time will in one city will be the same as compared to all other countries. So if it is 1 o'clock in Lahore, it will be 1 o'clock all over the Pakistan. But in USA, Canada and Australia, as they are the big countries, so there is the difference in the time zones. So if in the one city, if in the one state the time is 1 o'clock, maybe in the other city the time is 1:30 or 2 o'clock, right? Okay. As we move around the globe, we will eventually reach a place where the time is either one day ahead or behind. Now, if we move around the globe, if we move around the earth, we will come to a place where we would find that the time there is one day ahead or one day behind. For example, in Australia and other countries, they have a day ahead of you. Now in Australia, if today is Monday, and for example, if it is 1 o'clock in Pakistan on Monday, it would be 1 o'clock in Australia, but it would be Tuesday. So that country is almost about 24 hours or one day ahead of us. Now there will be some countries that would be one day behind us. Now for example, if it is 1 o'clock in Pakistan and it is Monday, in other countries, in one of the country around the globe, there would be a country, it would be 1 o'clock there as well, but that would be Sunday. तो कुछ कंट्रीज़ ऐसी हैं जो हमसे एक दिन आगे हैं और कुछ कंट्रीज़ ऐसी हैं जो हमसे एक दिन पीछे हैं. Now, why are the maps important? Maps are important because they tell us about the location and all the other different elements. So map, they give us a lot of information and we learn a lot of things through the maps. And this is the map which is telling us about the pre-partition India, like when Pakistan was not when Pakistan did not came into existence, when Pakistan was not independent state, this was the subcontinent, this was the pre-partition, before the partition of India. You can see that this is all of the India and this is the Pakistan. So this is the map of the this is the map of the pre-partition India, right? So it tells us about how the India and Pakistan were when they were united, when they were the one country, how did it look like. And here you can see that this is the map which tells us about the flood that was that came in 2010, 10 years ago when the flood came. So this map tells us that how did it affect the areas. So you can see that the dark blue areas, they were the completely flooded areas. So these are the areas which were completely flooded. Then we have a little light blue. These were the areas they were affected, and these areas, they had the major flooding, right? And then this is the turquoise color, which tells us tells us about the districts or the regions where there was a minor flooding. So this map tells us that how the flood affected the different regions of the Pakistan. So maps are very important because they give us a lot of information and we learn about a lot of things through the maps as well. So this was all for today. We will be doing the question answers and the workbook in the next lecture, and I hope that you have completed your work of the previous chapter. And if you have any confusion in the previous chapters, just go through the lectures once again for the question answers, as I have explained in detail. and I hope that you will complete your work. And if you have completed your work, well and good. And if you haven't completed your work, just do it today, because we will be doing the exercise in the next lecture. And the task for today is that you have to go through all the unit 2. You have to give it a read and try to make few of the at least 5 blanks, 5 true false and 5 MCQs from the whole unit. And you have to make all these objectives in your neat notebooks. So this was all for today. Take great care of yourselves and try to be safe at home, and take care of yourselves. Allah Hafiz.